Okay, Rabbi say good morning. It's a tremendous chos. Day after day with Zoicha, Baruch Hashem, to have Rabbi Efrayim Shapiro from Miami, a worldwide speaker, Baruch Hashem. I know many people that listen to his drushes all the time and are inspired by him, and he inspires thousands of people around the world. And we have the schos to have him here to give us a little bit of chizuk in Yeshivas Beis Dovid, Baruch Hashem.
Good morning, Rabbi. I'm really very honored to speak here in the yeshiva, and I want you to know, I met the Rosh Yeshiva a little bit ago. I'm absolutely in awe of him. I'm in awe of the yeshiva and the hatzlacha that he's having, and how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu has allowed him to accomplish. I'm not being megazem, it's not hyperbole. I wanted to say that opening line and tell you, I'm absolutely in awe of your Rosh Yeshiva. So I want to just give Rabbi Wiesenfeld a bracha. You should be zeichet to continue your avodas hakodesh gesundte heit, helping Bochrim, Talmidim, Klal Yisrael, and to be zeichet to riboy kvod shamayim barabim. There's an unbelievable medrash. The pasuk says in this week's parsha, Vayarach esreach begadav. It's talking about Yitzchak smelling the clothing of Yaakov. The medrash says on the word begadav, it could be read as Baigdav. Baigdav is a traitor. A very powerful story that will be, hopefully, something that we could aspire to accomplish. The Gemara speaks about somebody named Yosef Mashisa. Basically, he was a person who ended up becoming, from the word Baigdav, a traitor, and he really turned on his people. It's a very sad story. But as a result of helping the enemies of Klal Yisrael and turning his back on us, the enemy said to Yosef Mashisa, we'd like to reward you. Go into the Beis HaMikdash and take out something as a reward. Please, by all means. He went in and he took out the Menorah Hazav, the golden menorah. They said to him, listen, we meant the reward, but we didn't mean something like the Menorah Hazav. That's not for you. Go back in and take something else. He said, I'm not going back in. They said, no, go back in, take something else. He said, I'm not going back in. And they told him to go in, and they would reward him with the tax money of 3 years. And he stood his ground, till finally they said, if you don't go back in, you're going to suffer a misa meshuna. He did suffer a horrific death. The Medrash goes on to say, look at a Medrash Rabbi, you'll see it clearly on this pasuk, look it up. A very, very brutal death, what they did with his body. When they asked him to go back in, he turned to them and said, it's not enough I angered my God once, I should anger him a second time? And he didn't go back in. And then I told you what happened to him. The Mashkiach, Rav Matisyahu Solomon, Zoler Gesund und Stark Sein, says often, and it's brought down in the name of the Panavizharav, the most obvious question. Why did he go back in? 60 seconds or 2 minutes earlier, he had no qualms and problem walking into the Beis HaMikdash, into parts you're not allowed to walk, and he took the golden menorah. And now 2 minutes later, they told him to go back in, and now he's not going back in. Why not? What changed? You went in a minute ago, go in again. What happened? The Panavizharav says, because when he went in the first time, he had a brush with Kedusha. And when you have a brush with Kedusha, it could very well be a life-transforming situation. And that one brush with Kedusha, that one time, he didn't even go in for a brush with Kedusha. He went in to take out a Menorah Hazav, but he had a brush with Kedusha. Something changed him. And from that one brush with Kedusha, he said a minute later, I'm not going back in, and he met a Misa Meshuna. The point of the Medrash is, every person in their life has one or many brushes with Kedusha. It comes in many different forms. And for every person, their brush with Kedusha is different. Mine is not yours, and yours is not his, and his is not the other person's. But what you do with that brush with Kedusha, what stops most people from changing with a brush with Kedusha is very simple. I davened for the Amar. I had the privilege, the Yeshiva allowed me. Yehi chavoid, Hashem melech, Hashem malach, Hashem yimloich. He is, he was, he will be. That's not the way you talk. You say was, is, will be. Past, present, future. What's up with the order? Hashem is, Hashem was, Hashem will be. Don't we do avar, and then present, and then future? The answer is, if a person starts with the avar, the past, they'll never change. I've made mistakes. Everybody has. But if a person is busy with the avar, the past, it's just very, very hard to change. I happen not to learn Daf Yomi. There are other shiurim that I give, but people who learn Daf Yomi tell me that the number one thing that you're told is, let's say you're 80 blot behind, 200 blot behind. If you attempt to start with the blot of where you're behind, you'll never do it, ever. Ever, ever, ever. You're behind? Start with today's hour. I am behind 210. We'll worry about it. We'll talk about it. We'll make it up. But don't talk to me about the past. Because if you talk to me about the past, you will never, ever be changed with a brush with Kedusha. And so that's why the order is, says Hashem, talk to me about now. Talk to me about today. You want to talk to me about the past, we'll talk a different time. I think what stops people from getting into the transformation of a brush with Kedusha is dwelling on the past. People who are successful work with the present and go from there. There's a tremendous organization called Lev La'achim here in Eretz Yisrael. A number of years ago, a terribly sad story happened. A couple in Kira for Lev La'achim had a 3-year-old boy. And on his 3rd birthday, they gave him the upsharon. During the day, he went to Cheder. His head was hurting. He went to lie down, and in the afternoon, he passed away on his 3rd birthday, a little kid. In fact, I've said this over, and I heard the family say, our 3-year-old in the morning was wrapped in a tallis, and in the evening, he was wrapped in a tallis. In the morning, he was wrapped in a tallis, because when you take a boy to Cheder for upsharon, you wrap him in a tallis, his eyes should see only purity, and in the evening, he was in a tallis because he was buried. The parents are sitting Shiva. And in the middle of Shiva, the man was surrounded by about 30 chevra, and he gets a phone call. He takes the call and he comes back. And he's very emotional. He's like crying. So they ask him, what was it? He said, I'm in the middle of trying to be Makarev 8 boys. There are 8 boys that don't keep Shabbos. I'm trying to be Makar of them. So one of the 8 called and said, Rabbi, we heard your 3-year-old died. Me and the other 7 were keeping this Shabbat in his memory. So I'm emotional. So the Chevra there were quiet. One of them stood up. Sometimes people at a Shiva home unfortunately say things that aren't the smartest. He got up and he said to the rabbi, is that such a big deal? Like they'll keep this Shabbat, but they probably won't keep a second one. So is that such a big deal? Like one Shabbat and not another one, is that really such a biggie? This is what he said to the father of the 3-year-old. So the father of the 3-year-old stood up in front of everybody and he addressed the guy and he said, listen here. You want to know if it's a big deal? Do you know what I would do to get my 3-year-old back for one Shabbos? Do you know what I would do to have my 3-year-old back for one more Shabbos, where he would just hold my hand and sit on my knee when I sang Zviros? Do you know what my wife would do to get our 3-year-old back for one Shabbos, to see him run around the house? She's in the kitchen. You want to ask her? Go ask her what she would give up to have our 3-year-old back for just one more Shabbos. You think it's not such a big deal? Go ask my wife. And now God's getting back 8 children for one Shabbos. And you think it's not such a big deal? You really think it's not such a big deal that he's getting back 8 kids for one Shabbos? Go speak to my wife. You have anything else to say? I had the privilege of saying this over and meeting the family many times. People who are successful with brushes with Kedusha. My father's Atzal. Today's his 25th yard site. Today, 27 Cheshvan is the 25th yard site of my father. He used to say, God's not in the wholesale business, he's in the retail business. Retail means every small thing counts. People who are successful, don't talk to me about the past. Talk to me about today's daf, and then I'll worry about the past. People who utilize brushes with Kedusha are people that work with the present, people who realize that everything's a big deal. And if anybody here wants to know if it's a big deal, I'll give you the phone number of that couple in the northern part of Eretz Yisrael. Ask her if it's a big deal. You know what I think is the biggest impediment to people not successfully utilizing brushes with Kedusha? There's a famous person, he passed away a few years ago, but he needed a bone marrow transplant in City of Hope Hospital in LA. When a guy has a bone marrow transplant, he has to stay nearby for 100 days in case he's called back. 50 days through, 2 of his friends, the guy's name was Bainish, 2 of Bainish's friends said, let's go from New York to LA to be Mevakar Chayla. They went there. In the middle of the visit, Bainish says, you know what? There's a guy from Yerushalayim who's having a bone marrow transplant in the City of Heart. Let's give him encouragement and go. The 3 of them went. By the time they got there, it was too late. He had the transplant. He was already out. They felt bad they couldn't give him chizuk. They turned to leave. As they're leaving, a male nurse, the guy in his 60s, the head nurse, says to the 3, hey, Jews, stop. I need you guys to do me a favor. I'm the head nurse here. I always tell the patient before the transplant the following words. After your transplant, you're going to feel like dead, no kayak, 0, for about 48 to 72 hours, but don't worry, that's normal, that's usual. After 2-3 days, you'll feel yourself again. I couldn't tell it to your guy, because he's from Jerusalem, he only speaks Hebrew, I only speak English, there's a language barrier. His wife is there. Could you 3 go tell the wife not to flip out, not to worry? That for 2-3 days she won't have any energy. He won't have any energy, but not to worry. Because that's what happens, they don't feel fine. Could you tell her? As he's talking, he sees the 3 of them and the wife are looking past him, like where my hand is, there was a glass wall. They're looking straight through and their mom is shaking. So he turns around to see, what was it? The Yerushalmi Yid, who a half hour earlier had the bone marrow transplant, half hour earlier, he turned around to see. He moved his feet, albeit slowly, off the bed. He stood up. He walked with his IV pole. He put on his Bieber hat. He walked to the sink. He washed Nagelwasser and got back into bed 30 minutes after the procedure. The male nurse was shrieking. I heard this story firsthand from one of the 3, Bainish's friend who went. A well-known person. Shrieking. It's not possible. It's not possible. It doesn't work that way. You feel dead for 72 hours. My friend turned to the male nurse who was shrieking and said, listen here, there's only one of 2 explanations of how that happened. Number 1, it was a medical miracle, 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million. Hey buddy, isn't there a second possibility? You just told me that you always tell the patient not to worry, they won't be able to do this, this, or this. This was the first time, because of a language barrier, you couldn't speak to the patient. So look at me. Maybe because you didn't tell the patient what they couldn't do, they were able to do it. Because if you keep telling somebody what they can't do and can't do and can't do, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The guy didn't do it to be malicious, but he broke down and said, I won't do it again. Because if you keep telling somebody what you can't do and what you can't do and what you can't do, you can bet, guess what? They won't be able to. It's the first time, because of the language barrier, you couldn't tell the guy what he couldn't do. He didn't know he's supposed to be dead. He didn't know that he's supposed to feel like a shmata for 72 hours. So you know why he got up after 30 minutes? Because the first time he didn't tell somebody what they couldn't do. No one should tell us what we can't do. Because if you're busy with what you can't do, it's something of the past that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe that's how you make brushes with Kedusha, something exceptional. I want to end with one story that happened to me 6-7 months ago. I'm telling it to myself because it gives me chizuk. You want to listen, join the journey. I got a phone call from somebody. I live in Miami. I've actually been living there a little over 50 years. If anybody here wants to come visit, yes. It would be a pleasure. It would be a true honor. I davened for the Omer because today was my father's yard site. I thoroughly enjoyed being here. I felt a lot of warmth. I met a lot of great Bachrim. I sincerely and genuinely enjoyed my morning here, and I thank you for that. And as I told you when I started, I met some of the Rabbeim. I'm in awe of your Rosh Hashiva. That's it. I can't say it any better. I'll end with the story. Happened 7 months ago. I got a phone call from somebody who has a yeshiva somewhere in the tri-state area. It's not really a yeshiva. It's more of a particular program to try to help young men that are having the absolute most difficult time with Yiddishkeit. Extremely challenging and way off. He said, I'm giving the 17 of them a trip to Miami. Not a religious trip. I didn't ask him anything about his program. But, if I'm in town and I could get them to hear a shir from you, could you? I had a very busy week that week, very busy. I had 15 minutes from 7:45 to 8 on Tuesday. I said, bring them for 15 minutes. The 17, I'll give them a shmooze. I'll try to do something. I show up at 7:45 on Tuesday, and he's sitting in the hall of my shul in North Miami Beach. He's pacing. He says, Shapiro, they didn't all come. I said, that's not a problem. I'm not a numbers guy. However many came. Come on, let's go. How many showed up? 1. Where'd the other 16 go? They went banana boating on Bayside. Bayside is in Miami. 16 of them chose to go banana boating instead of me. I'll speak to the one kid. I gave a very different type of talk, 15 minutes. I talked to him one-on-one. His chair faced mine. I spoke to him for 15 minutes. I spoke to him a little bit about what I told you. Use your brushes with Kedusha. Don't talk to me about wholesale. I'm talking about retail. Everybody makes mistakes. Talk to me about retail. Tuesday I finished. Wednesday I was dying to know, was I successful with the kid at all? Honestly, I wanted to know. So I called up the rabbi, did you have a safe trip back? Okay, did they like banana boating? How did it go with the kid? He gets so emotional, he says to me, the kid loved it. You have no idea how good I felt. I changed the kid in 15 minutes? What's 15 minutes? I said, was there something in particular he liked? The cat. I said, the cat? I didn't speak about a cat. He said, no, not you. Outside your shul, you have a cat. I said, I know, it's like a Gilgal. It's always there. It's like probably become the most famous cat in the world. He loves a cat. So for an hour and a half after you spoke to him, he sat on your bench outside your shul and he petted the cat for an hour and a half. He loved it. I said, I'm not talking about the cat. Me. Anything you liked about my speech? The cat. It was the end. It hurt. Wednesday. Friday, I was doing a Project Inspire convention in Connecticut. I'm there with a son of mine, getting dressed, running to Mincha, phone rings, 917 number, I pick it up. Hi, it's Rabbi so-and-so. Do you remember me from 2 days ago? You know, I brought the first thing I yelled. I was still going, the cat's not for sale. Not for sale. She said, no, that's not why I'm calling. You remember I was supposed to go to 17, 16 women? I said, of course I remember. I brought one. You remember yet? I want to tell you something. That kid has not kept Shabbos for years. I mean years. He called me 15 minutes ago and he said, you know, Rabbi, I was thinking a lot about what Rabbi Shapiro said when he spoke to me about retail, brushes with Kedusha, not thinking about the past. I'd like to keep Shabbos for the first time in well over a decade. Can I come to your house for Shabbos? So I just wanted you to know that in a few minutes that boy's arriving for Shabbos, and I wanted to thank you. And that's how I went into Shabbos 7 months ago. I want to give you all a bracha from the bottom of my heart. Talk to me about the present. Talk to me about today's daf. Talk to me about the retail business. And if you ever wonder, like, is it such a big deal? Like all I did was fill in the blank, 5 minutes here or whatever. That's such a big deal. I'll give you the phone number of that young couple in the northern part of Eretz Yisrael, and you'll find out what's a big deal. Because you and I don't know. But every small thing that we do is a big deal. It should be the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that all of us have brushes with Kedusha. We feel those brushes with Kedusha. We love them, and we utilize them. And enough brushes with Kedusha, we should be zeichet to go back to that place of the Beis Hamikdash. B'mheira b'yameinu. Amen.